In the small, dusty town of Ridgewood, nestled in the heart of the American South during the turbulent 1960s, life moved at a slow and predictable pace. The sun baked the cracked roads, and the air was thick with humidity. But beneath the surface, calm, tensions simmered like a pot about to boil over. Ridgewood was a town divided. Its white residents held most of the power, while its black citizens lived under the weight of systemic racism and inequality. At the center of this fragile balance was Sheriff Thomas Harlan, a man whose badge symbolized authority, but whose heart was burdened by deep-rooted prejudices. Sheriff Harlan had spent decades enforcing the law in Ridgewood. He was known for his stern demeanor and unyielding commitment to maintaining order. To many, he was a figure of respect. To others, he was a symbol of oppression. Yet despite his hardened exterior, there was one person who could soften him: his daughter, Emily Harlan. Emily was the light of his life, a bright, compassionate young woman with a spark that set her apart from everyone else in town. She had recently returned home after finishing college, eager to make a difference in their troubled community. Unlike her father, Emily saw the humanity in everyone, regardless of skin color or social standing. Emily often clashed with her father over his outdated views. "Daddy," she would say, her voice firm yet gentle, "you can't keep treating people differently just because of the color of their skin. It's wrong." Sheriff Harlan would sigh, brushing off her words as youthful idealism. "You don't understand how things work around here, Emily," he'd reply gruffly, but deep down, her words lingered in his mind, gnawing at him in ways he couldn't quite articulate. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of town, Dr. Marcus Reed ran a modest clinic that served the needs of Ridgewood's black residents. Dr. Reed was a skilled physician, respected by some but despised by others. His presence in the town was tolerated only because of necessity. Many white doctors refused to treat black patients, leaving them with no choice but to seek care elsewhere. Boomwang. Those who harbored resentment toward Dr. Reed were several of Sheriff Harlan's deputies, particularly Deputy Clyde Morgan. Morgan openly mocked the doctor, calling him derogatory names and spreading rumors about his competence. "That colored man thinks he's better than us," Morgan sneered to his fellow officers. "He should stick to his own kind." One fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Emily decided to take a walk home after volunteering at the local library. She loved these quiet moments when the world seemed peaceful and full of possibility. As she strolled along the sidewalk, lost in thought, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her chest. Gasping for air, she collapsed onto the ground, clutching her heart. Passers-by rushed to her aid, shouting for help and calling for an ambulance. Word of Emily's collapse spread quickly through the tight-knit town. When the call came into the sheriff's station, Deputy Morgan answered it with a smirk. "It's Sheriff Harlan's girl," someone reported. "She's collapsed near the library. We need help fast." Morgan listened intently, but then glanced at his fellow deputies, exchanging knowing looks. "There's no way we're letting him near her," he said coldly, referring to Dr. Reed. Though the doctor was only minutes away and renowned for his medical expertise, Morgan insisted they wait for the county ambulance instead. "We'll handle this ourselves," he declared, ignoring the urgency in the caller's voice. As the minutes ticked by, Emily lay unconscious on the sidewalk, her breathing growing shallower with each passing second. Her friends pleaded with the deputies to reconsider, urging them to call Dr. Reed. "He's right here, he can save her," one of them cried desperately, but Morgan shook his head, his lips curled into a sneer. "That colored doctor ain't touching her," he spat. "Not while I'm around." His decision was final, backed by the silent agreement of his colleagues. By the time the county ambulance finally arrived, precious minutes had been lost. Emily was rushed to the hospital, where doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize her. But the delay proved fatal. Despite their best efforts, Emily succumbed to her condition later that night, leaving the entire town in shock. When Sheriff Harlan received the news, he fell to his knees, overcome with grief. His daughter, his beloved Emily, was gone. And as the reality of her death sank in, A terrible suspicion began to form in his mind. Why hadn't Dr. Reed been called? Why had his deputies waited so long to act? The next morning, whispers of what had happened rippled through Ridgewood. Some spoke of Deputy Morgan's refusal to summon Dr. Reed, while others dismissed such claims as exaggerations. But Emily's closest friends knew the truth, and they weren't afraid to speak out. One of them, Sarah, marched straight to the sheriff's office, her eyes blazing with anger. "Your men let your daughter die because of their hatred," she shouted, pointing an accusing finger at Sheriff Harlan. "They wouldn't let Dr. Reed help her even though he was right there. How could you let this happen?" Harlan stared at Sarah, his face pale with shock. For a moment he was speechless. Then rage bubbled up inside him and he lashed out, yelling at Sarah to leave his office. But as the door slammed shut behind her, the weight of her words hit him like a punch to the gut. Could it be true? Had his own deputies, the men he trusted to uphold the law, allowed their prejudice to cost his daughter her life? Haunted by guilt and anger, Sheriff Harlan began investigating the events leading up to Emily's death. What he uncovered confirmed his worst fears. Not only had his deputies actively prevented Dr. Reed from helping, but they had also lied about it afterward, blaming the doctor for not showing up when he hadn't even been called. Harlan realized that his own policies and attitudes had created an environment where such cruelty could thrive. The realization left him reeling, forcing him to confront the painful truth. He had failed his daughter, not just as a father, but as a leader. That night, unable to sleep, Sheriff Harlan sat alone in his dimly lit office, staring at a photograph of Emily. Her smile radiated warmth and kindness, qualities he now realized he hadn't fully appreciated until it was too late. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." In that moment, he vowed to make amends, not just for Emily, but for everyone who had suffered because of the hatred and injustice that had poisoned their town. The stage was set for change, but the road ahead would be anything but easy. Sheriff Harlan knew that repairing the damage would require more than apologies. It would demand action. And as dawn broke over Ridgewood, casting a soft glow over the sleeping town, he prepared to take the first step toward redemption. The days following Emily Harlan's death were a blur of grief and anger in the small town of Ridgewood. The loss of Sheriff Thomas Harlan's daughter sent shockwaves through the community, but it also ignited a firestorm of accusations and recriminations. For Sheriff Harlan, the pain of losing Emily was unbearable, yet it was compounded by the growing suspicion that his own deputies had played a role in her untimely demise. As whispers of their refusal to call Dr. Marcus Reed spread, the sheriff found himself caught between his duty as a leader and his personal anguish. A father's dissent, Harlan spent hours locked away in his office, staring at the empty chair where Emily used to sit when she visited him at work. Memories flooded his mind, her laughter, her fierce determination to make the world a better place, and the countless arguments they'd had about justice and equality. Now those conversations felt like warnings he had ignored. "Daddy," she would say, her voice firm but gentle, "you can't keep treating people differently just because of the color of their skin." At the time, Harlan dismissed her words as naive idealism, but now they echoed in his ears like a haunting prophecy. Unable to face the townspeople or even his own reflection, Harlan threw himself into uncovering the truth. He began by questioning the deputies who had responded to the call on the night Emily collapsed. Deputy Clyde Morgan, the ringleader of the group, stood defiant in front of him. "We did what we thought was best, Sheriff," Morgan said, his tone dripping with arrogance. "That colored doctor wasn't needed. We waited for proper help." "Proper help?" Harlan snapped, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. "You let my daughter die while you sat around debating whether to call someone who could have saved her." Morgan shifted uncomfortably but didn't back down. "Dr. Reed isn't one of us," he muttered under his breath. "He doesn't belong here." Harlan clenched his fists, resisting the urge to lash out physically. Instead, he turned his attention to the other deputies, pressing them for answers. One by one, they confirmed what Sarah, and his own instincts, had already told him. Doctor. Reed had been deliberately excluded because of his race. The realization hit Harlan like a punch to the gut. His men, the ones he trusted to uphold the law, had allowed hatred and prejudice to override their sense of duty. And worse still, he knew deep down that their attitudes weren't entirely foreign. They mirrored his own biases, which he had failed to address over the years. Confronting Dr. Reed, haunted by guilt and determined to make amends, Harlan made the difficult decision to visit Dr. Marcus Reed at his modest clinic on the outskirts of town. It was a journey fraught with tension. Harlan had never set foot inside the clinic before, let alone spoken directly to its owner. As he approached the building, he noticed how worn it looked, the paint peeling, the windows cracked, but also how welcoming. People milled about outside, some waiting patiently for treatment, others chatting quietly. Despite the challenges faced by the Black community, there was a sense of resilience here that humbled Harlan. Inside, Dr. Reed greeted him with a mixture of surprise and caution. The doctor was a tall man with kind eyes and a calm demeanor, though Harlan could see the weariness etched into his features. "Sheriff Harlan," Reed said evenly, gesturing toward a chair. "This is unexpected." Harlan hesitated, unsure of where to begin. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. "Dr. Reed, I owe you an apology. One I don't deserve, but one I need to give. My deputies, they should have called you that night. They refused because of your race, and because of that, my daughter died." Tears welled up in his eyes. As he continued, "I failed her, I failed you, and I failed this town." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Dr. Reed leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "Sheriff, I appreciate your honesty," he said slowly. "But apologies won't bring Emily back, and they won't undo the damage done to this community. Words mean nothing without action." Harlan nodded, swallowing hard. "I know," he admitted, "and I'm ready to act. Tell me what needs to be done." Reed studied him carefully, searching for sincerity in his words. After a long pause, he replied, "Start by holding your men accountable. Let the town see that no one is above the law, not even those sworn to enforce it." The fallout true to his word, Harlan wasted no time in implementing changes within his department. He fired several deputies, including Deputy Morgan, whose blatant racism had cost Emily her life. Their dismissals sent shockwaves through Ridgewood, dividing the town further. Some residents praised Harlan for taking a stand against bigotry, while others accused him of betraying his own people. Protests erupted outside the sheriff's office, with angry mobs demanding his resignation. "You're ruining everything," shouted one protester, shaking a fist at Harlan as he addressed the crowd. "Why are you siding with them? You're supposed to protect us." Harlan stood tall despite the hostility, his voice steady. "I'm protecting everyone. Or at least, trying to. What happened to my daughter showed me that hate and fear have no place in this town. If we want to move forward, we need to start treating each other with respect." His words fell on deaf ears among some, but others listened. Slowly, cracks began to form in the wall of resistance. Even a few former critics began to reconsider their stance, recognizing the sincerity behind Harlan's actions. Building bridges, as tensions simmered, Dr. Reed emerged as a powerful advocate for change. He organized rallies and meetings, encouraging members of the Black community to speak out against the injustices they faced daily. For the first time in years, voices that had long been silenced were heard loud and clear. Together, they demanded reforms, not just in law enforcement, but in education, housing, and healthcare. Harlan worked closely with Reed during this period, attending meetings and listening to the concerns of those he had once overlooked. It wasn't easy. Old habits died hard, and there were moments when his temper flared or his patience wore thin, but each step brought him closer to understanding the depth of the inequalities plaguing Ridgewood. One evening, after a particularly emotional meeting, Harlan approached Reed. "Thank you," he said simply, "for helping me see what I couldn't before." Reed smiled faintly. "It's not about thanking me, Sheriff. It's about making sure this never happens again to anyone." Bunt saw a new beginning. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, signs of progress began to emerge. Trust, once shattered, started to rebuild piece by piece. The town's divisions hadn't vanished overnight, but conversations that had once been impossible were now taking place openly. Emily Harlan's death had become a catalyst for change, a painful reminder of the cost of prejudice but also a beacon of hope for a brighter future. For Sheriff Harlan, the journey was far from over. Every day he carried the weight of his mistakes, using it as fuel to drive him forward. And though he could never bring Emily back, he vowed to honor her memory by continuing the fight she had championed. A fight for justice, equality, and humanity. In the quiet moments when the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming, Harlan would look at her photograph and whisper, "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but I promise, I won't stop until things are right." The weeks following Sheriff Thomas Harlan's dramatic reforms in Ridgewood were a whirlwind of tension and transformation. The town, once divided by rigid racial lines, was now grappling with the aftershocks of change. While some residents embraced the new direction, others clung fiercely to old prejudices, creating an atmosphere thick with hostility. For Sheriff Harlan, every decision he made felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm of resentment and fear. Yet, despite the challenges, he remained steadfast in his commitment to honor his daughter Emily's memory by fighting for justice and equality. A town on edge, as news of Deputy Clyde Morgan's dismissal spread, so did outrage among certain factions of the white community. Morgan had been popular among his peers, not because of his competence, but because of his fiery rhetoric that resonated with those who shared his racist views. His firing became a rallying cry for those who saw Sheriff Harlan's actions as a betrayal. Protests erupted outside the sheriff's office almost daily, with angry mobs chanting slogans like, "Protect our own," and "Harlan betrayed us." One afternoon, as Harlan stood on the steps of the station addressing a particularly rowdy crowd, he felt the weight of their fury pressing down on him. "You're destroying this town," shouted a burly man at the front of the group. "We trusted you to keep order, not hand it over to them." Harlan took a deep breath, steeling himself against the barrage of insults. "Order isn't built on hate," he replied firmly. "What happened to my daughter showed me that. If we want peace, we need fairness, and that starts with holding everyone accountable, no matter who they are." His words only fueled the anger of the protesters. Bottles and rocks began flying toward the station, shattering windows and forcing officers to barricade themselves inside. That night, as Harlan sat alone in his office, nursing a bruised cheek from a thrown object, he couldn't help but wonder if he'd underestimated how deeply entrenched racism was in Ridgewood. But even as doubt crept into his mind, he reminded himself of Emily's voice, her insistence that things could be different if people tried hard enough. Dr. Reed steps forward while Sheriff Harlan faced backlash from his own side. Dr. Marcus, Reed found himself thrust into the spotlight as a symbol of resilience and hope. The black community rallied around him, drawing strength from his calm determination and unwavering belief in justice. Reed organized meetings in churches, schools, and community centers, encouraging people to speak out about the injustices they faced. He urged them not to let fear silence their voices, reminding them that change often required sacrifice. At one such gathering, held in the basement of a local Baptist church, Reed addressed a packed room of listeners. "For too long we've accepted what they've given us or refused to give us as normal," he said, his voice steady yet impassioned. "But Emily Harlan's death showed us something important. We have power when we stand together. We can demand better, for ourselves, for our children, and for everyone in this town." His words ignited a spark in the crowd. People nodded and murmured in agreement, emboldened by his message. Among them was Sarah, Emily's close friend, who had become a vocal advocate for reform. She approached Reed after the meeting, her eyes shining with determination. "Dr. Reed, I want to help," she said earnestly. "Emily believed in this fight, and I owe it to her to keep going." Reed smiled warmly. "Then join us," he replied. "We'll need all the allies we can get." Together, they planned rallies and marches, calling for accountability and systemic change. Flyers were distributed throughout the town, urging residents to attend. Some white citizens, inspired by Harlan's efforts and moved by Emily's story, joined the movement, lending their support to the cause. It was a small but significant step toward unity. Resistance grows. Not everyone welcomed these developments. As the protests gained momentum, so did opposition. Anonymous threats began appearing on the doors of businesses owned by Black residents, warning them to stay silent or face consequences. Graffiti appeared overnight on walls across town, bearing hateful messages like, "Stay in your place," and "Ridgewood belongs to us." Fear gripped the Black community, but instead of retreating, they grew more resolute. One evening, as Dr. Reed returned home from a long day at the clinic, he noticed a brick lying on his porch with a note tied to it. The note read, "Leave while you still can." Reed stared at it for a moment, then calmly picked it up and placed it on his kitchen table. When Sheriff Harlan visited the next morning, Reed showed him the threat without a trace of fear. "This won't stop me," he said simply. "If anything, it proves we're doing something right." Harlan clenched his jaw, anger simmering beneath the surface. "I'll find whoever did this," he promised. No one should live in fear. True to his word, Harlan assigned trusted officers to investigate the threats. Though progress was slow, arrests were eventually made, sending a clear message that acts of intimidation wouldn't go unpunished. The crackdown earned Harlan praise from some quarters, but it also hardened the resolve of those opposed to his reforms. A moment of reflection, amid the chaos, Sheriff Harlan found solace in unexpected places. One evening, as he walked through the park where Emily used to play as a child, he encountered an elderly Black woman sitting on a bench. She introduced herself as Mrs. Evelyn Carter, a longtime resident of Ridgewood. "I knew your daughter," she said softly. "She came to my house once to tutor my grandson. She was a good girl, Sheriff, full of light." Harlan's throat tightened as tears welled up in his eyes. "Thank you," he managed to say. "That means a lot." Mrs. Carter reached out and patted his hand. "Change is hard, but it's necessary. Your Emily understood that. Don't let her death be in vain." Her words stayed with Harlan long after their conversation ended. They reinforced his belief that the path he'd chosen, though difficult, was the right one. He realized that healing Ridgewood wouldn't happen overnight. It would take time, patience, and countless small victories along the way. A turning point. The turning point came during a massive rally organized by Dr. Reed and his supporters. Hundreds of people gathered in the town square, carrying signs that read, "Justice for all," and "In memory of Emily Harlan." Speeches were delivered, songs were sung, and stories of discrimination and resilience were shared openly. For the first time, many white residents listened, not just passively, but with genuine empathy. As the event drew to a close, Sheriff Harlan stepped onto the makeshift stage. His presence met with a mix of applause and jeers. Taking a deep breath, he addressed the crowd. "I've made mistakes," he admitted. "Big ones, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to fix them. But today, I see hope. I see people coming together, not because they have to, but because they believe in something better." The crowd fell silent as he continued. "Emily taught me that love and understanding can overcome hate. Let's honor her memory by building a town where everyone is treated fairly, where no one dies because of prejudice." When Harlan finished speaking, the square erupted in cheers. Even some skeptics found themselves moved by his sincerity. It wasn't a perfect resolution, far from it, but it marked the beginning of a new chapter for Ridgewood. Looking ahead, though the road ahead remained fraught with challenges, the seeds of change had been planted. Dr. Reed, Sheriff Harlan, and countless others continued working tirelessly to bridge the divides that had plagued their town for generations. Together, they proved that even in the darkest moments, hope could shine through, if people were willing to listen, learn, and act. For Sheriff Harlan, each step forward was a reminder of the daughter he'd lost and the promise he'd made to her. In quiet moments, he would whisper to himself, We're getting there, Emily. Slowly, but surely, we're getting there. The months following the rally in Ridgewood's town square marked a pivotal shift in the community. While tensions still simmered beneath the surface, there was an undeniable sense of momentum building toward change. Sheriff Thomas Harlan and Dr. Marcus Reed had become unlikely allies, united by their shared goal of creating a fairer, more just town. Yet as progress unfolded, so did new challenges, ones that tested not only their resolve but also the patience of the people they sought to unite. A fragile peace in the wake of the rally, the atmosphere in Ridgewood began to shift ever so slightly. Conversations that were once avoided or dismissed outright started taking place in homes, schools, and workplaces. White residents who had previously turned a blind eye to the struggles of their black neighbors began asking questions, seeking understanding. Some even attended meetings organized by Dr. Reed, eager to learn how they could contribute to healing the wounds of the past. But old habits died hard. For every person willing to listen, there was another clinging stubbornly to prejudice. Anonymous. Threats continued to plague the black community, though they became less frequent as Sheriff Harlan cracked down on those responsible. Still, fear lingered like a shadow over Ridgewood, reminding everyone that progress came at a cost. One evening, as Dr. Reed sat in his modest clinic reviewing patient files, he reflected on the changes sweeping through the town. He felt a cautious optimism, a belief that things could improve if enough people committed to the cause. But he also knew that optimism alone wouldn't be enough. Real change required action, sacrifice, and resilience. As if on cue, Sarah knocked softly on the door before stepping inside. She had become one of Reed's closest allies since Emily's death, dedicating herself to keeping her friend's memory alive. "Dr. Reed," she said, her voice tinged with urgency, "we need your help. There's been another incident." Reed sighed deeply, setting down his pen. What happened this time? Sarah explained that a group of black teenagers had been attacked while walking home from school earlier that day. Though no one had been seriously injured, the assault left the victims shaken and angry. Word was spreading quickly, and emotions were running high. Fearing retaliation, some parents urged their children to stay indoors while others called for protests. "This can't go unanswered," Sarah said firmly. "If we don't stand up now, it'll only get worse." Reed nodded thoughtfully. "You're right, but we have to respond carefully. Violence will only divide us further." Together, they decided to organize a peaceful demonstration outside the courthouse the following morning. Flyers were distributed throughout the town, inviting residents of all races to join in solidarity. The message was clear: hate would not be tolerated in Ridgewood. Standing together the next day, hundreds of people gathered in front of the courthouse holding signs that read, "No more hate and justice for all." Among them were Sheriff Harlan and several of his deputies, standing guard to ensure the event remained peaceful. It was a bold move, one that drew both praise and criticism, but Harlan knew it was necessary. If he wanted to rebuild trust, he had to lead by example. As the crowd swelled, Dr. Reed took the microphone to address the assembly. "Today, we stand together, not as separate groups, but as one community," he declared, his voice steady and powerful. "We refuse to let fear and hatred tear us apart. We demand justice not just for those attacked yesterday, but for everyone who has suffered because of prejudice." His words resonated deeply with the crowd, earning applause and cheers. When Sarah stepped forward to speak, her voice trembled with emotion. "Emily believed in a better world," she said, tears streaming down her face. "She believed in fairness, kindness, and equality. Let's honor her memory by continuing the fight she started." Sheriff Harlan listened intently, moved by the passion and unity on display. For the first time in what felt like forever, he saw glimpses of the town he wished Ridgewood could become, a place where differences were celebrated rather than feared. Pushback and perseverance. Not everyone viewed the demonstration favorably. Critics accused Harlan of pandering to outsiders and undermining traditional values. Some business owners refused to serve black customers openly, citing economic pressure from racist patrons. Others spread rumors about the protesters, claiming they were stirring up trouble for attention. Despite these obstacles, the movement gained traction. Inspired by the courage of those speaking out, more white residents joined the cause, offering support in ways big and small. Teachers incorporated lessons on civil rights into their curriculums. Local churches hosted interfaith services aimed at fostering dialogue. Even the town newspaper ran editorials calling for unity and accountability. Harlan played a crucial role in maintaining momentum. He worked tirelessly to root out corruption within his department, replacing fired deputies with officers committed to fairness and integrity. He also implemented training programs focused on cultural sensitivity and de-escalation tactics. These efforts weren't always well received. Some accused him of going too far, but Harlan remained undeterred. "We've got a long way to go," he told Dr. Reed during one of their regular meetings, "but I'm starting to see cracks in the walls we've built around ourselves. That gives me hope." Reed smiled faintly. "Hope is good, Sheriff. But remember, hope without action is empty." Harlan nodded, knowing Reed was right. Change wouldn't come overnight, but every step forward mattered. Personal sacrifices for Harlan. The journey was deeply personal. Each decision he made carried the weight of Emily's memory, haunting him with reminders of the daughter he'd lost. Nights were the hardest. Alone in his quiet house, he often found himself staring at photographs of Emily, replaying their conversations in his mind. Her voice echoed in his thoughts, urging him to keep going even when the road seemed impossible. One night, unable to sleep, Harlan drove to the park where Emily used to play as a child. Sitting on a bench under the stars, he whispered, "I miss you, sweetheart. Every day feels heavier without you, but I promise I won't stop fighting for the world you dreamed of." Tears streamed down his face as he spoke, releasing some of the grief he'd carried for months. In that moment, he realized that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about finding purpose in the pain. Emily's death had shattered him, but it had also given him a mission to create a legacy she would be proud of. Building trust, however, was slow to rebuild. Many black residents remained wary of Harlan's intentions, skeptical that a man who had once embodied the very system oppressing them could truly change. Dr. Reed understood their hesitation and worked tirelessly to bridge the gap. He encouraged open discussions between community members and law enforcement, emphasizing the importance of transparency and mutual respect. At one such meeting, held in the basement of a local church, a young black man named Jamal stood up to share his story. "I've been stopped by cops for no reason more times than I can count," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "How do I know anything's really changed?" Harlan met Jamal's gaze, his expression solemn. "You're right to question me," he admitted. "I can't erase the past and I can't undo the harm that's been done, but I can promise you this. I'm listening, and I'm doing everything in my power to make sure no one else goes through what you have." Jamal studied Harlan for a moment before nodding slowly. "We'll see," he said simply. Though his response wasn't enthusiastic, it was a start. Looking ahead, as winter approached, bringing colder temperatures and shorter days, the spirit of Ridgewood continued to evolve. Progress was uneven, marked by setbacks and victories alike. But amidst the uncertainty, there was a growing sense of possibility, a belief that change, though difficult, was achievable. Dr. Reed summed it up best during a speech at a holiday gathering. "This isn't the end of our journey," he said, addressing the diverse crowd. "It's just the beginning. We've taken important steps, but there's still much work to be done. Let's carry this momentum into the new year, and beyond." As the crowd cheered, Sheriff Harlan stood quietly off to the side, watching with a mixture of pride and determination. He knew the road ahead would be long and challenging, but he also knew they were moving in the right direction. For Emily, for Ridgewood, and for the future, he vowed to keep pushing forward, one step at a time. As spring returned to Ridgewood, the town began to feel different. Not perfect, but undeniably changed. The seeds of hope planted during the darkest days after Emily Harlan's death had started to sprout, though growth came in fits and starts. Progress was fragile, like a sapling struggling against harsh winds, but it persisted. Sheriff Thomas Harlan and Dr. Marcus Reed remained at the heart of this transformation, guiding the community through challenges that tested their resolve and unity. A new normal life in Ridgewood was slowly settling into what some called a new normal. The protests and rallies that had once dominated the town square were now less frequent, replaced by quieter acts of solidarity. Black-owned businesses, once marginalized, began receiving support from unexpected quarters. White customers who had previously avoided these establishments now shopped there openly, drawn by a growing sense of shared purpose. Schools introduced programs encouraging students to learn about each other's cultures, fostering friendships across racial lines. Even the local newspaper dedicated a weekly column to highlighting stories of cooperation and resilience. But beneath this surface calm, tensions lingered. Some white residents grumbled about the changes, accusing Sheriff Harlan of favoritism. "He's forgotten who he works for," muttered one man at the diner, his voice loud enough for others to hear. Others whispered about leaving Ridgewood altogether, claiming the town no longer felt like home. These voices were fewer than before, yet they carried weight, reminding everyone how deeply ingrained prejudice could be. For Harlan, navigating this delicate balance was exhausting. He faced criticism from all sides, those who thought he wasn't doing enough and those who believed he was doing too much. Nights were long and sleepless, filled with thoughts of Emily and the promises he'd made to her. Yet every morning, he rose determined to keep pushing forward. He reminded himself that change wasn't about pleasing everyone. It was about doing what was right. A test of resolve one. Crisp April morning, a crisis erupted that threatened to undo months of hard work. A young black boy named Isaiah Johnson was arrested for allegedly shoplifting from a grocery store owned by a white family. Witnesses later revealed that Isaiah hadn't stolen anything. He had simply been holding a bag of chips while waiting for his mother to pay. But the store owner panicked upon seeing him and called the police. News of Isaiah's arrest spread quickly, igniting outrage among the black community. Many saw it as yet another example of systemic racism, proof that old habits died hard. Protests erupted outside the sheriff's office with demonstrators chanting "Justice for Isaiah" and demanding accountability. Among the loudest voices was Sarah, who stood on the steps of the station, megaphone in hand. "This isn't just about Isaiah," she declared. "It's about every child who has been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin." Sheriff Harlan listened intently, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. When he stepped outside to address the crowd, his face was pale but resolute. "I understand your anger," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "And you're right to demand answers, but I need you to trust me to handle this properly." The crowd murmured skeptically, but Harlan pressed on. "I'll review the case myself, and if mistakes were made, I'll hold those responsible accountable, including me if necessary." Dr. Reed watched silently from the sidelines, impressed by Harlan's willingness to confront the issue head-on. Later that evening, the two met privately to discuss next steps. "You handled that well," Reed admitted, "but words aren't enough anymore. People are looking for action." "I know," Harlan replied grimly, "and they'll get it." True. To his word, Harlan launched an investigation into the incident. He reviewed surveillance footage, interviewed witnesses, and spoke directly with Isaiah and his family. Within days, he announced that the charges against Isaiah would be dropped and that the store owner would receive sensitivity training. Additionally, he mandated that all deputies undergo refresher courses on racial bias and proper conduct during arrests. Though not everyone was satisfied with the outcome, most acknowledged that Harlan had acted swiftly and fairly. For many, it was further evidence that he was committed to lasting change. Healing through dialogue. The weeks following the Isaiah Johnson incident, Dr. Reed organized a series of town hall meetings aimed at addressing lingering mistrust between law enforcement and the black community. These gatherings provided a platform for residents to share their experiences, both positive and negative, with the police. Emotions ran high, with some attendees breaking down in tears as they recounted painful memories of profiling and discrimination. Others praised recent improvements, crediting Harlan's reforms for making them feel safer. At one such meeting, a middle-aged black woman named Rosa spoke candidly about her interactions with the sheriff's department. "For years, I've been afraid of the cops," she admitted, "but lately I've seen signs of change. It's small things like officers introducing themselves instead of barking orders, but it makes a difference." Her words resonated with many in the room, including Harlan, who sat quietly taking notes. After the meeting, he approached Rosa to thank her for speaking up. "Your honesty helps us improve," he told her sincerely. "We're not perfect, but we're trying." Rosa nodded, her expression softening. "I see that, Sheriff. Keep going." Moments of grace amid the struggles. Moments of grace began to emerge, offering glimpses of the future Ridgewood could become. One Saturday afternoon, a group of volunteers gathered to repaint the walls of Dr. Reed's clinic, which had been vandalized earlier in the year. White and black residents worked side by side, laughing and chatting as they transformed the building into a vibrant symbol of hope. Children played nearby, oblivious to the divisions that had once defined their town. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sheriff Harlan joined Dr. Reed on the clinic's porch to admire the freshly painted walls. "It looks good," Harlan remarked, a hint of pride in his voice. "It does," Reed agreed. "But it's more than paint. It's a reminder that we're stronger together." Harlan nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think we'll ever fully heal?" he asked after a pause. Reed smiled faintly. "Healing isn't about forgetting the past. It's about learning from it and choosing to move forward anyway." Aishur, honoring Emily's memory. As summer approached, the town prepared to honor Emily Harlan with a memorial service marking the anniversary of her death. Flyers were distributed inviting residents to attend, and a plaque was commissioned to be placed near the library where she had volunteered. The inscription read, "In loving memory of Emily Harlan, whose light inspired us to seek justice and equality for all." On the day of the service, hundreds of people gathered under clear blue skies, united in remembrance. Friends, family, and strangers alike shared stories of Emily's kindness and determination. Sarah delivered a heartfelt speech, her voice trembling with emotion. "Emily believed in a better world," she said. "She taught us that love is stronger than hate, and courage can overcome fear. Let's continue her fight, not just today, but every day." When Sheriff Harlan took the podium, he struggled to hold back tears. "Emily was my daughter," he began, his voice thick with grief. "But she was also so much more. She was a beacon of hope, a force for good in a world that often feels dark. Losing her shattered me, but it also showed me the cost of prejudice and the power of change." As he finished speaking, Harlan unveiled the plaque, drawing applause from the crowd. In that moment, he felt a glimmer of peace, a reassurance that Emily's legacy would live on in the hearts of those she had touched. Looking forward, by the end of the summer, Ridgewood was far from perfect, but it was undeniably different. The scars of the past remained visible, but so did the signs of progress. Businesses thrived, schools flourished, and relationships deepened. Though challenges lay ahead, the town had proven its capacity for growth and renewal. For Sheriff Harlan and Dr. Reed, the journey was ongoing. They knew that true equality required constant vigilance and effort. But as they stood together watching the sunset over Ridgewood, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet satisfaction. Change was hard, messy, and often painful, but it was possible. And for a town once divided by hate, that was something worth celebrating. As autumn settled over Ridgewood, the town seemed to exhale after months of tension and transformation. The leaves turned fiery shades of orange and red, mirroring the passion that had fueled its residents' fight for justice. While the scars of the past still lingered, they were now accompanied by a quiet optimism, a belief that the future could be brighter than the present. For Sheriff Thomas Harlan and Dr. Marcus Reed, this season marked not just an end but also a beginning, the culmination of their efforts to heal a fractured community and honor Emily Harlan's memory. A legacy takes shape, the memorial plaque. Dedicated to Emily became more than just a tribute, it became a symbol of hope. Positioned near the library where she had spent countless hours volunteering, it drew visitors from across the town. Parents brought their children to read the inscription aloud, explaining who Emily was and why her story mattered. Teachers incorporated her legacy into lessons about empathy, courage, and standing up for what is right. Even those who had once dismissed her ideals found themselves moved by the sincerity of her impact. For Sheriff Harlan, seeing people connect with Emily's memory brought both comfort and purpose. Each time he passed the plaque, he paused to reflect on how far they'd come and how much work remained. "She would have loved this," he murmured one evening, running his fingers over the engraved words. She always wanted everyone to feel seen. Dr. Reed, too, felt the weight of Emily's legacy guiding their progress. At a community meeting held in late September, he addressed the crowd with heartfelt gratitude. "Emily didn't just inspire, change. She embodied it," he said. "Her life reminds us that even in the face of hatred, love can prevail. Let's carry that spirit forward as we continue building a better Ridgewood." Challenges persist. Despite the strides made, challenges persisted. Old prejudices refused to vanish entirely, lurking beneath polite smiles and cautious interactions. Some white residents grumbled about going too far or giving away power, while others quietly withdrew from community events, unwilling to embrace the new reality. Meanwhile, many Black residents remained wary of fully trusting the changes, fearing that progress might stall if attention waned. One incident underscored these lingering fears. A local restaurant owner, newly supportive of integration, announced plans to host a fundraiser for Dr. Reed's clinic. The event was meant to celebrate unity and raise funds for medical supplies, but backlash came swiftly. Anonymous flyers appeared around town, accusing the owner of selling out and threatening boycotts. Though most ignored the threats, a few patrons stayed away, leaving the owner disheartened. When Sheriff Harlan heard about the intimidation tactics, he acted immediately. Officers patrolled the area during the fundraiser, ensuring safety and deterring troublemakers. To everyone's relief, the event went smoothly, raising enough money to purchase essential equipment for the clinic. As Dr. Reed thanked the attendees, his voice carried a note of defiance. "Fear won't stop us," he declared. "We're stronger than hate." Building bridges to address lingering mistrust, Sheriff Harlan introduced a program called Community Connect, designed to foster relationships between law enforcement and residents. Officers were paired with families from diverse backgrounds, spending time together outside of official duties, attending barbecues, playing sports, or simply sharing meals. At first, participation was low, with skepticism on both sides. But, over time, the initiative gained traction, creating opportunities for genuine connection. One pairing stood out: Deputy James Carter, a young officer eager to prove himself, and Mrs. Evelyn Carter, no relation, the elderly woman who had once spoken kindly to Harlan in the park. Their initial meetings were awkward, filled with stilted conversation and forced smiles. But as weeks passed, a bond formed. Mrs. Carter shared stories of growing up in Ridgewood during segregation, while Deputy Carter opened up about his struggles balancing duty with personal beliefs. By the end of the program, they greeted each other warmly, like old friends. At a follow-up meeting, Harlan listened as participants shared their experiences. Many spoke of newfound understanding and mutual respect. "I used to see cops as enemies," admitted one Black teenager. "Now, I realize they're just people trying to do their jobs." Harlan nodded, feeling a swell of pride. Programs like Community Connect weren't perfect solutions, but they planted seeds of trust that could grow over time. Celebrating progress. By November, Ridgewood decided to hold a Unity Festival, a celebration of diversity and resilience. Organizers transformed the town square into a vibrant hub of activity, complete with food stalls offering dishes from various cultures, live music performances, and art exhibits showcasing local talent. Children played games while adults mingled, exchanging stories and laughter. At the center of the festival stood a large mural painted collaboratively by artists from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. Its theme was simple yet profound. Hands of all colors reaching toward one another forming a circle of unity. Beneath the mural, a plaque read, "Together, we rise." During the opening ceremony, Sheriff Harlan took the stage alongside Dr. Reed. "This festival isn't just about celebrating what we've achieved," Harlan told the cheering crowd. "It's about reminding ourselves why we started this journey, to create a town where everyone belongs." Dr. Reed echoed his sentiment. "Unity doesn't mean forgetting our differences," he added. "It means embracing them. Our strength lies in our diversity." As fireworks lit up the night sky, signaling the end of the ceremony, the crowd erupted in applause. For a moment, Ridgewood felt whole, not divided by race or history, but united by hope. Reflections and resolutions. In quieter moments, Sheriff Harlan often visited Emily's grave, sitting beside the headstone and talking to her as though she were still there. "You'd be proud of how far we've come," he said one chilly December morning, "but I know you'd remind me that we can't stop now. There's still so much to do." He wasn't alone in reflecting on the year's journey. Dr. Reed, too, spent time contemplating the changes they'd witnessed. In a journal entry dated December 15th, he wrote, "Ridgewood is not the same town it was a year ago. We've faced pain, loss, and resistance, but we've also discovered courage, compassion, and resilience. Change is never easy, but it's worth fighting for." Sarah, who had become a leader among the younger generation, expressed similar thoughts during a school assembly. "Emily taught us that every action matters," she told the students. "Whether it's standing up for someone being bullied or speaking out against injustice, small acts can spark big movements. Don't ever underestimate your power to make a difference." Looking ahead, as the year drew to a close, Ridgewood prepared to welcome the new decade with cautious optimism. Plans were underway to expand initiatives like Community Connect and introduce educational programs focused on civil rights history. Businesses pledged to hire more inclusively, and schools committed to fostering environments where all students felt valued. For Sheriff Harlan and Dr. Reed, the road ahead remained uncertain. They knew that true equality required constant effort and vigilance. Yet they also recognized that Ridgewood had proven its capacity for growth. Together, they vowed to keep pushing forward, one step at a time. On New Year's Eve, as fireworks exploded overhead, Harlan stood beside Reed, watching the townspeople celebrate. "Do you think we'll ever finish this work?" Harlan asked softly. Reed smiled, his eyes twinkling in the firelight. "Probably not, but that's okay. It's not about finishing. It's about moving closer to the world we want to live in. And tonight I think we're closer than we've ever been." Harlan nodded, feeling a rare sense of peace. As the clock struck midnight, marking the start of a new year, he whispered under his breath, "Happy New Year, Emily. We're still fighting for you." And with that, Ridgewood stepped boldly into the future, a town forever changed by tragedy, but united by the enduring power of hope, love, and determination.